Hey folks, how you doing? Hope you guys are all doing well and have had a good weekend. And off we start with our chapter three. Today we're going to talk about specifically water and its many importance in biology and in life. Um, many things, including the human body, is actually made almost completely out of water. So you can all you can tell from this that we need to study about water and know the characteristics that make it important in biology. So water makes life possible on Earth, right? If we didn't have water, then we can't really have life at all because we drink water, right? We we allow plants to get water, so we can basically eat them later, right? Um, many animals um, depend on water. The earth itself, right, depends on the rain and the water levels in the seas, and there are many aspects that allow water to be very important, right? Um, So water can exist, in many states. It can exist like in the liquid form. It can exist in the gas form, right? In the form of humidity. It can also exist in its ice form, right? So it would be solid. Um, and you will see a bit later, um, you know, many animals actually benefit from this ice, and it allows them to basically like you know live on ice, right? To maintain their lives. Okay. So these unique uh, emergent properties. Remember that term. It's coming again. Emergent mean like if we had water molecules apart, then they don't give you the characteristics uh, that water as a molecule gives you, right? So these properties emerge when actually the water atoms come together and becomes H2O, and water as we know it. Okay. So the structure of water molecule allows it to interact with other molecules, right? So we know that water is made out of an oxygen atom and two hydrogens, right? And from our previous chapter, we learned that the oxygen basically is much more electronegative than the hydrogens on the other side, right? And because of that, the water creates two opposite poles. One is a electronegative or partially electronegative pole, and the second pole towards the hydrogens would be partially positively charged. Okay. Hopefully this is making sense a little bit by now. We're not gonna really dive deep into the chemistry, if you will, but we will talk about how you know chemistry or the phase of chemistry and its relationship to biology, and to help us understand um, its importance, especially when it comes to water. Okay. So you're looking at an example here of the importance of the different forms of water. So here in this case, water is being presented here as ice, right? And so this is a seal that lives in the Arctic, okay? And you can tell that it really depends on that form of water, right? It depends on living on ice. And so if that ice basically starts melting, then this is gonna basically affect this seal negatively, right? And it's not gonna allow it to um, basically float on the water and and hunt and eat. Okay. So in the case of the seal right here, what allows this ice, this piece of ice that the seal is on, to float on the liquid water, which is another form of water underneath it? That's pretty cool, right? So they're made out of the same material. They're both H2O, water, but they actually differ in a bit. So what's going on here is, so I wanted to just tell you a little bit, at the chemistry level, what's going on. So, and we explained this a little bit in the previous chapter, and I just gave you a little summary just 2 minutes ago. So this is the H2O, a water molecule, and this is another H2O, which is another water molecule. What you're looking at is the interaction between water molecules. So basically, in a let's say a glass of water, there are trillions and trillions of these molecules interacting with each other to give you water. Okay. So you can see here the oxygen is on one side, and it's electronegative, right? It's denoted this. It's more electronegative. Okay. And the hydrogens are on this side, and they're more positively charged. You can see that, right? Okay. We say partial positive charges. Okay. So the electrons basically of all of these atoms are being pulled this way towards the oxygen. Okay. So one thing that's important in this figure is that water, the atoms in a water molecule, they're bonded together using covalent bonds. Okay, so the bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen, this line, which is represented by what? Do you remember? The two electrons. These are covalent bonds, so they're sharing electrons. Okay. Now, whenever one molecule gets close to another molecule, like you see here, right? These two molecules are forming a weak attraction. Okay, and you can see the negative side of an oxygen, the electronegative side, is being basically attracted weakly, okay, to the hydrogen side of another molecule. And this basically forms hydrogen bonds. So remember this, between water molecules, we find what? Hydrogen bonds. Between or within a water molecule, we find what? Covalent bonds. Okay, this is important. All right, so these weak interactions between the molecules is basically what really allows it to be found in different forms. It can be found in liquid form, okay? As you can see, remember that seal that was floating on top of the ice, right? Underneath that ice is liquid water, right? And the reason why the water is liquid is because, these molecules are basically closer to each other, right? Because of the nature of the water being liquid, right? So basically they're very weak, and so they break apart easily, and then they bond again, and they break apart, and they bond again. So this is why we say these hydrogen bonds are weak attractions. Okay. Now in the form of the ice, right? The molecules are further apart, as you can see here in this depiction, and so they're more organized, right? And so they hold together a bit more than in the liquid form. Okay, and so this whole scenario makes ice basically less dense than its liquid counterpart. Okay, so what happened because of all of this is you find that ice floats on top of the liquid form of water. Okay, hopefully this is making sense. a little bit. All right, so um, in the water molecule, right, the electrons of the polar covalent bonds, right, spend more time near the oxygen than the hydrogen. We said this, right? So those electrons are moving towards the oxygen, okay? Remember how they share, right? That's why we call them covalent bonds, right? Those electrons go next to the oxygen more, so they make the oxygen more electronegative than the hydrogens. Okay. Because of all of this, we say that the water, because of that unequal, right, sharing of electrons, so the electrons are being pushed towards the oxygen more. That uneven distribution is what makes a water molecule a polar molecule. Okay? And so polarity of water is very important, okay? Because it allows water molecules to form hydrogen bonds with each other, which is important. That's what holds the water together, as we mentioned, and what gives us the different states of water. Okay? Alright, so this is basically showing exactly the same depiction we were talking about earlier and we just talked about right now, okay? It's the same exact thing. So you find hydrogen bonds between water molecules, okay? You find that the atom is more the whole molecule is more electronegative towards the oxygen side than the hydrogen side, okay? We find the different interactions, right? Because of this difference in electronegativity, we find that's what makes the different interaction between different molecules within water, okay? And due to this unequal sharing, we call this a polar covalent bond, okay? So water has four properties that facilitate an environment for life, right? It has cohesion behavior, and we will talk about what each one is and give examples. It's got ability to moderate temperature, okay? Expansion upon freezing, and versatility as a solvent. So all four are very important um, in the case of biology as well, okay? So let's talk about cohesion, right? So cohesion is basically uh, when you know hydrogen bonds basically hold water molecules together um, in a form called cohesion. Okay, so our concern is to differentiate between cohesion and adhesion, right? So the cohesion is, think about this, is like the strength of water molecule with like the strength of within a water molecule. Let's put it this way. Okay. So in the case of a plant, let's say, right? Um, plant has to transport the water from the root all the way to the leaves, right? It has to travel basically opposite of gravitational force. Okay. So gravity is going what from north to south, right? Or from top to bottom. But in the case of plant, the water is traveling the other way around, the opposite. So it does this through the cohesion property of water, basically, in which basically the molecules inside water are basically attached with each other, and you know, they keep attached, and allow the plant to basically transport the water all the way to the leaves. Okay. Now, adhesion is basically, think about this as like a adhesive property. Okay, so you're sticking water on onto basically the cells of the leaves or whatever part of the plant we're talking about. Okay, So this is why adhesion is the attraction between basically water and the plant cell walls. Okay, it's what allows water to stick on to the cells. Okay, so adhesion has to do with the exterior sticking of water. Cohesion is like what makes the water molecules bond together within it. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. All right, so this is actually showing you what we just talked about. Okay, so this is at the microscopical level right here. All right, if we follow the arrows. Okay, so these are water molecules. Okay, we can see that adhesion is basically what allows the water molecules to stick on the root or the leaves. Okay, cohesion is basically what allows the water to grab onto itself on its way up to be delivered to the leaves or wherever it's going. Okay. Does this make sense? Hopefully. Okay. We just want to talk about surface tension a little bit. Okay. So surface tension is basically as it sounds. It means water has a high surface tension, okay, on its surface. So it's got a lot of tension on its surface. Okay, this is what um, this picture is showing right here. Okay, you can see that this spider is like just basically not uh, not going under the water, but just staying on top, right? Like so. This is what we mean by the tension of the surface of water. Okay, so it is a measure of how difficult it is to break the surface of a liquid. Okay, so as I mentioned, water has an unusually high surface tension, and because of the hydrogen bonding, okay, between the molecules at the air-water interface and to the water below. So I want you to try to fill up a glass of water. Try to like overfill it, right, all the way to the top. And what you will notice is that you can actually keep filling little by little water, right, until it's actually full of water. And then you can notice that the water actually goes above the the lip of the cup, right? It goes above it, and it gets to a point where it actually stays above it, but it doesn't start dripping. Why is that? It's because of the surface tension. It's got enough tension to hold itself on top. Okay? Alright, so we're going to talk about now moderation of temperature by water. Okay? So water can basically balance and absorb and release heat very efficiently. Okay, so water basically absorbs heat from warmer air and releases stored heat to cooler air. All right, so what this means is that um, so water can basically absorb and release a large amount of heat, okay, with only a slight change in its own temperature. So this means that the seas, right, whenever the sun is like basically hitting the seas with its high temperature, right, the seas themselves basically absorb so much of that sun energy, right, and basically hold on to that heat due to its due to the moderation properties of water. Okay, but the temperature, when we take the temperature of that water, we find that it didn't start boiling because of the sun hitting it. Okay, So I want to talk about kinetic energy. Basically, kinetic energy is basically the movement of atoms, right? It measures the movement of atoms, and thus we will know, the energy in whatever we're measuring. Okay, so it's the movement, the energy of motion. Okay, so the kinetic energy associated with random motion of atoms or molecules is thermal energy. Okay, so when we create kinetic energy due to movement by atoms and molecules, right? We're creating thermal energy. Okay. Now temperature is a different thing. So temperature represents the average kinetic energy of the molecules in the body of matter. Okay. Thermal energy is transferred from one body of matter to another, is defined as heat. Okay. So let's talk about one thing. So if we compare basically let's see here, a coffee pot, right? Let's say you boil a coffee pot, okay, and we compare it to let's see here, a pool, okay, pool basically filled with water, all right, and that pool is basically under the sun, on a summer day, okay. Which one do you think has more thermal energy? So you might think that the boiling of hot water, right, the coffee pot has more thermal energy. But in reality, the pool has more because thermal energy, okay, takes into consideration the volume of, um, of water, right? So the pool has much more water. So that means the thermal energy in it is much higher than the pot of coffee. Okay, if we look specifically at temperature, right? Temperature is a different story. That's why I was trying to tell you that temperature and thermal energy are kind of separate, two different things. The coffee pot has obviously a higher temperature, so and the pool has what, a higher thermal energy. Okay. So in our case, right, in the case of biology, we want to know about calories, right? A calorie basically is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 Celsius. Okay. So this means that how much heat do we need to apply, okay, to a quantity of 1 gram of water to raise it up 1 degree Celsius. Okay. And it's the same thing. It is also the amount of heat released when 1 gram of water cools by 1 degree Celsius. So it goes both ways, cools and heat. So the calories on food packages are actually kilocalories. So 1 kilocalorie is 1,000 calorie. It goes the same way like when we say kilogram and gram, same way. 1 kilocalorie is 1,000 cal. Same thing as when we say 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 gram. Okay? Same mentality. So the specific heat of a substance is the amount of heat that must be absorbed or lost for 1 gram of that substance to change its temperature by 1 degree Celsius. Okay? So that means the measurement of how much heat, okay, that needs to be absorbed by, let's say for example, water to change its temperature by 1 degree Celsius. So as you can imagine from all those water properties, what do you think water's specific heat is going to be? It's going to be high. So just one little hint. basically, any question that goes along for water, in this chapter is always gonna be high, high, high. Okay, so water has high specific heat. Okay, water has high surface tension. There you go. So just think this way. Okay, and that should basically make it easier a little bit. Okay. So if we say that a solvent or a liquid has a low specific heat, that means it has a rapid changes in temperature due to the amount of heat that's applied. So, for example, rubbing alcohol has a 0.65 or calories per gram per Celsius. All right. If we compare that to water, water has 1 cal per gram per Celsius. So you can see it's what is that, 40%, almost 45% more than rubbing alcohol. So you can see the specific heat of water is higher. Copper has only 0.09 cal per gram per Celsius, okay? You can see it's like 10% of specific heat of water. Okay, so water resists changing in its temperature because of its high specific heat. So you can see the relationship of all of these properties that makes water amazing for life, for biology, and for us, right, to know about. Okay, so water high specific heat can be traced to hydrogen bonding. It all comes down due to those hydrogen bonding, right? They're important. They're important in water, they're important in our DNA. That gives you a little hint why hydrogen bonds are important. They're actually in our DNA too, okay? And we will talk about that when we get to the DNA chapter and RNA chapter, okay? So, in the case of water-specific heat, heat is absorbed, right, when hydrogen bonds break, okay? So, what happened is that when you boil water, right, the increase in temperature in that water being boiled, right, it breaks those hydrogen bonds, okay, which allows the heat to be absorbed. Hopefully this is making sense. Now, heat is released when hydrogen bonds form. So when that water is cooling down now again, those water molecules, what do you think are going to do? They're going to start, what are they going to do? They're going to start coming and like forming those weak hydrogen bonds and, bond to each other because of that difference in electronegativity, right? Okay, and as a result, the water gets cold, and this is what we say heat is being released. Okay, so the high specific heat of water minimizes temperature fluctuations to within limits that permit life. Okay. Okay, so this is a picture of the Pacific Ocean on the side of California, and you're seeing here how water basically allows temperature to be cooler towards the sea, like the seaside. Okay. So when you get closer to the seaside, you can see that the temperatures here, we can see the yellow color, right? They're actually in the 70s. But then when we go further away from the water, and there's a reason for that. Okay, and we will talk about that. We've been talking about it, but we will explain it right now a little bit more too. So the large body of water, as we mentioned, right, can absorb a huge amount of heat from the sun, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so it does this while only warming up just a tiny bit. This is the property of water that makes it do that. Okay, and it does that for our benefit and for the Earth's benefit, right? So at night and during the winter, uh, this slightly warmer temperature in water, basically what it does is it actually cools the air during the winter. So it gets cold, right, in the winter. And so that whole amount of stored heat in that water for many days, it starts basically warming up the air around it and close to it, as you can see here. Okay? And this is what this is explaining. So, um, an important property of water is evaporation. Okay? You've heard that term before. It's, when water evaporates, okay, so from its liquid form to its gas form, okay. Um, an evaporation example is sweating, for example, okay. When we sweat from exercise or from heat uh, outside, this is a form of body's ability to cool itself down. If the body doesn't sweat and the water does not evaporate, then that heat is basically like just stuck inside the body, and it just you can't live you know um, that way. You have to evaporate um, the heat in the form of sweat to be able to cool down. Okay, that's the way everything is made. Okay. Same thing with plants. Okay, plants, if you didn't know that, they also evaporate when the sun is basically hitting the leaves, right? They evaporate their water that they're absorbing and they're holding onto um, to cool themselves and not burn. All right, so we measure the evaporation or vaporization, okay, um, with the term we call heat of vaporization. It's the heat that a liquid must absorb for 1 gram to be converted to gas. Okay, so this means how much heat can that liquid, such as water, right, have to absorb for 1 gram of that water to be converted or evaporated to gas. Okay. As a liquid evaporates, its remaining surface cools, a process called evaporative cooling. This is what we were talking about with the plant and the sweating process and organisms. Okay. And again, this evaporation helps stabilize temperatures in organisms like humans and plants. Okay, and bodies of water. Okay. This is basically what's happening here. The elephant here is basically spraying itself with water to cool itself. Okay. What's happening is that the water molecules with the greatest kinetic energy leave as gas, which is basically the water molecules that are on the outside, and the ones that are basically remaining on that are attached, right, by what the their adhesion property, right, onto the elephant's skin. That's what allows the elephant to cool down a little bit. Okay. All right. So we're gonna talk about floating of ice on liquid water. Okay. So we talked about this when we started this PowerPoint in the beginning. We talked about the seal, right? How it allows a seal to float on the ice to be able to live, right? So I'm just gonna explain this a tiny bit again. So ice floats in liquid water, right? Because of those hydrogen bonds in ice, right? That are ordered. Do you remember how in the ice form, they're the molecules are further apart and they're more ordered um, in their liquid, right, they're kind of like overlapping, right? The bonds are overlapping, and they're closer with each other. Due to that, basically the bonds are weaker. They break apart easily. They come back and attach to each other. So this is why ice is found in its state. Okay, so at zero degrees Celsius, water molecules are locked into this crystalline form. Okay. Water is less dense as a solid than as a liquid. Due to that, all of those hydrogen bonds properties is basically what's allowing the solid form, which is the ice form of water, to be less dense and float on top um, of the water. Okay, so water reaches its greatest density at 4 degrees Celsius. So 4 degrees Celsius is 4 degrees above 0 Celsius, which is the freezing point of water. Okay. In the case of Fahrenheit, that would be 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So, well, in biology, we'll focus on Celsius as a measurement of temperature. Okay. So imagine if ice sank, right? If it didn't have the um, if it wasn't less dense than the liquid form, then all bodies of water would eventually freeze solid because of their um, solid icy form, right? It's like when you put an ice cube inside a glass of water, right? It's gonna make the whole water colder, okay? Same thing. So if that ice sank basically inside the water, basically everything would freeze solid, and it makes life impossible on Earth, right? All those like um, living organisms in the seas, they will just die. They're not accustomed to freezing temperatures. Okay, and this is basically showing the same thing, right? The hydrogen bonds between the water molecules form in its ice form. Okay, showing how stable it is. Okay, due to their ordered structure. In the case of liquid water, right, we can see that exactly what I was saying, right? The overlapping, right? This disordered, um, the hydrogen bonds basically break and reform very easily, unlike the icy form. Okay. And basically, many scientists are worried that global warming is having a profound effect on icy environments, and it is true. I mean, you can see in this depiction here. If you follow along a little bit, the purple line basically is where the ice sheet used to be between 1981 and 2010, and scientists have been able to track it down, and it is at the blue line now. So you can see how, and this is like next to Greenland, which is like in the North Pole, so all the way in the North Pole, and there's Alaska, Russia, and Canada on the sides. Okay. So you can see the regression of ice um, from you know about 20 to 30 years, and you can imagine its effect on all those organisms that depend on the ice for them to float on, right, and maintain themselves. Okay. So we're gonna talk about now a little bit of chemistry terms here. Okay, so water is the solvent of life. Okay, when we say solvent, is basically a a form of an agent. Okay, that allows a solute to be dissolved in. Okay, a solution is a liquid. Let's define it. So a solution is a liquid. Okay, that is completely homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. Okay, So that means it has a solvent, a solute, many solutes, okay? That's what we call a solution. So when those mixtures are mixed together in a homogeneous way, okay? The solvent is basically what you use to mix in whatever you want to mix in, okay? The solute is the substance that is dissolved, okay? So if we take it into an example, right? If we try to dissolve salt in water, first of all, when we dissolve it, we create what? A solution, right? We're dissolving water and sodium chloride. We're making a solution. All right, which one would be the solvent? So we dissolve salt in the water. So the water would be our solvent, okay? And the solute will be what? The table salt, okay? An aqueous solution is one of which water is a solvent. Anytime we have water, that's the solvent, not like something else. You could have another type of solvents, but anytime we talk about water, we call it an aqueous solution. Okay. So water is a versatile solvent due to its polarity. So as we know, water is polar, and why is it polar? Because of those uneven, right? Sharing of electrons, making uh, basically water molecules polar. Okay, so when an ionic compound is dissolved in water, as you can see here, so what you're seeing here in this beaker is salt, what we just talked about, table salt. And what you're seeing here is a depiction of how salt is actually dissolved in water. Okay. So when an ionic compound, such as table salt, sodium chloride, its ionic compound, why? Is because sodium and chloride are being bonded to each other um, using ionic bond. Okay, and we talked about this last chapter. Each ion is surrounded by a sphere of water molecules called a hydration shell. All right. So what happened is when we dissolve sodium chloride, the sodium and the chloride breaks apart in water. Okay, that's how they dissolve, by the way. And water molecules basically encircle what, like you see here, and they surround the the different molecules. Okay, and they form what we call the hydration shell. So this encircling is a hydration shell. So you can see, if you pay attention a little bit here, that there is a difference between these two hydration shells. Okay, I'm not talking about the number of atoms, but the orientation difference of the atoms, of the water molecule atoms. Okay, you can see that in the case of chloride, okay, which is negatively charged ion, okay, those gray well, icons here, right? They're depiction of hydrogens. Is that right? So hydrogens are slightly positively charged, and they are less electronegative than the oxygen, if you remember. So because the chloride is negatively charged, what happened is the hydrogens get attracted towards the chloride in such a way like this, and they form the hydration shell. Okay. Now, in the case of sodium ion, it's the exact opposite. So these are the oxygens, and they're more electronegative, right? And they're more what? Negatively charged. Because of that, they get attracted to the positively charged sodium, and they encircle it like that. I hope this makes sense. Okay, so water can also dissolve compounds made of non-ionic polar molecules as well. So they don't have to be just ionic like what we saw here in the case of sodium chloride, I mean, the table salt. Okay, they could be different things like molecules in the bodies. Like for example, um, the tears in the eyes basically have a protein. I forgot the name. I think it's lysosome or liposome. I already forgot. But anyways, that molecule that protein is basically polar in water. Okay, uh, and this is basically an example of the water molecules basically, um, you know, also encircling that protein and basically allowing it to dissolve. Okay. So let's talk about these two terms. A hydrophilic substance is one that has an affinity for water. Okay, so that means it allows water uh, to pass through. Okay, a hydrophobic is a substance that does not have an affinity for water. Okay, right off the bat, can water and oil mix? No. So it's because of oil molecules are hydrophobic. Okay, why is that? Because they have relatively non-polar bonds. Okay, so only polar ones can actually, um, go through or dissolve in water. Okay, and so since oil molecules are non-polar, they would be hydrophobic. Now, hydrophobic molecules related to oils are the major ingredients of cell membranes. So what that reminds us of, the external membrane of a cell. Okay, it's made out of hydrophobic um, material. Okay, when we will talk about this, I'm not gonna confuse you right now. We'll talk about this later. And this hydrophobic uh, border, if you will, okay, basically it allows certain things to go through it, and it basically blocks many things to not go through it. Okay. So, as you can imagine, most chemical reactions in organisms involve solutes dissolved in water. Okay? Obviously, the whole body is made out of mostly water. Okay? So, a hydrogen atom and a hydrogen bond, right, between two water molecules can shift from one to the other. Okay? The hydrogen atom leaves its electron behind and is transferred as a proton or a hydrogen ion. And we will see in the next slide to give you more examples of what's going on here. Okay. The molecule that lost the proton is now a hydrogen or a hydroxide ion. So that would be OH minus. Okay. Molecule with the extra proton is now a hydronium ion. So that would be H3O positive. Though it is often represented as just H positive, H plus. Okay. Just think about this. Um, if there are more hydrogens, okay, um, in a solution, or as a result of a reaction, okay, and then the solution will become what? Acidic, okay, because of those extra protons or hydrogens. So whenever we say proton, it's the same thing as if we said hydrogen ions. Okay. Now, if a solution has more OH or hydroxide, the solution will be what? Basic. Or it would be the opposite of being acidic. Okay. So in the case of water, right, and this is being represented here, right, these are two molecules of water interacting, okay. The water is in a state of dynamic equilibrium at all time, right, in which water molecules dissociate at the same rate. We studied this term before, right, at which they do the same rate at which they are being reformed. So they go from this side to this side, then they go from this side to this side. Okay. What you will notice here is that whenever this bond gets broken down, right, a hydronium ion forms on one side. Okay. And basically, we also form a hydroxide ion due to the absence of the hydrogen. So one of the hydrogens basically from here gets transferred here, and this is why we said here that what a hydrogen atom and a hydrogen bond between two water molecules can shift from one to the other. Okay, so that shifting is what causes one of the molecules to become hydronium ion. Or, as we mentioned before, we can also say this is a proton or a hydrogen ion. Okay, it's positively charged. Now on this side, we can see that hydroxide ion is formed. Okay, and we said that if a solution has more of this, that means it's going to be basic. If it's got more of this, then it's going to be acidic. Okay. So, so those statistically rare, right? This dissociation of water molecules has a great effect on organisms, and it does. The body does that all the time. There's changes due to different, molecules being absorbed by cells and whatnot. So the body is in a constant of regulation of pH, which is a measurement of basically a solution if it's acidic or basic. Okay. So whenever water dissociate into its hydronium or H plus and OH hydroxide, these are very reactive. Okay. A change in concentrations of H plus and OH minus can basically, of course, drastically affect the chemistry of a cell. Okay. So concentrations of H plus and OH minus are equal in pure water. Pure water, we're talking about neutral water at pH of 7. So adding certain solutes, okay, let's say such as acids and bases, right, they will modify the concentrations of H pluses and OH minuses. So we will see an example of that in a bit. See it, and we'll see their effect on the concentrations of H plus and OH minus. So the biologists use the pH scale, as I mentioned, to describe whether a solution is acidic or basic. Okay. So an acid, when we say an acid, is a substance that increases the H plus concentration of a solution. Exactly what I said just 2 slides ago. A base is a substance that reduces the H plus concentration of a solution. And so just so we can be clear on this, if we reduce the H plus in a solution, then we have what? More of what? OH minus. Okay? Remember, in a neutral solution, we have an equal amount of H plus and OH minus. If we reduced the H plus, we have more of OH minus, which makes it what? Basic, a basic solution. Strong acids and bases dissociate completely in water. Okay. What that means is they start with being a solution, right, or a compound, and after they're being put in water, they just dissociate completely into their elemental or ionic forms. Okay. Now, as far as weak acids and bases, they reversibly release and accept back hydrogen ions. Okay, so that means they don't dissociate completely in water. Okay, and they can still shift the balance of hydrogen ion and hydroxide ions away from neutrality. Okay, because of that reversibility. So if we take a look here at the ammonia, right? You can see that reverse arrows back and forth. So when we use ammonia, okay, and we add hydrogen ions, okay, we get ammonium, right? And then so this can go the other way around, and so this is what makes this a weak. Anything that has a nitrogen would be what? A base, right? So that would be a weak base. Okay. I put here another example for you. That's carbonic acid. So that would be a weak acid. Okay. And we will see that this is actually also called a buffer. We will learn about what this means in a bit. Okay. So you can see that reversibility in the arrows here, right, stating that this can go either way. Okay, it can dissociate and create more hydrogen ions, or it can basically go back into this form in its neutral form. Okay. So the pH scale, anytime we have an acidic solutions, right, that means we have a pH that's less than 7. So if I tell you, a liquid has a pH of 2, or for example, in the case of coffee or tomatoes or I don't know, hydrochloric acids or things like that, and they have a pH of, let's say, 1 or 2 or 3, these are all acidic. Okay, they're less than 7. If they're basic, okay, the solutions are basic, then they would be greater than 7. Okay, most biological fluids have pH values in the range of between 6 to 8. So they stay around the neutral. They don't go extremely acidic or extremely basic. And there's a reason for all of this, right? And by the way, we make a solution more acidic by adding more protons or H plus concentration. Okay. So the H plus is the most important thing when we talk about acidic or basic solution. We make a basic solution, right, when we take away H plus. So we have more OH or hydroxide ions, okay? This is just a depiction of basically what we're talking about as far as pH goes, okay? So in the case of neutral, we have an amount of hydrogen that's equal to the amount of hydroxide, making it neutral in the solution, okay? Such as what? Pure water, right, is neutral. Human blood is about 7.4, so tiny bit slightly acidic, okay? But that's how it is, okay? And if it really changes so much. Um, let's say the pH goes up to 8, or it goes down to like below 7 or something like that, then the human will not last more than a few minutes. Okay. And you can see here the different examples of things that are acidic, meaning that there are more hydrogen proton or hydrogen ions than their OH counterpart. Okay. And they would be more basic if there are less protons uh, in the solution. So meaning the OH will be more. Okay. All right. So as mentioned, the internal pH of most living cells is close to 7. Okay. Even a slight change in the pH can be harmful. I mean, those things are very uh, um, detailed in the way they work. Okay. Uh, the body is always in a homeostasis um, form, trying to maintain its pH, maintain everything to its neutral form. Okay. Buffers are substances that minimize changes in concentrations of H plus and OH minus in a solution. All right. So buffer is basically the solution to a solution, if you will. Okay. So if a solution is getting too much acidic, the buffer will do what it will do is um, it will basically get or bond extra H plus ions, okay, to make a solution more, or put it towards neutral or more basic again. Okay. So most buffer solutions contain a weak acid, okay, and its corresponding base, which combine reversibly with H plus ions. Again, H plus ions is what we're dealing with here with. We're either making a solution more um, acidic by increasing those H plus ions, or basic by decreasing those H plus ions. And the buffers will do that through their weak acid and their corresponding base. So the weak acid basically will be able to donate H pluses in case we want to make the solution more acidic, and then the base will be able to capture those H plus ions to make the solution more basic. Okay. This is what's happening in the case of our basically very important buffer in the body, and that's carbonic acid. Okay. So acids donate H plus in aqueous solution, as I mentioned. Okay. And this is the reversibility of a reaction. It can go this way or this way. If it went to the left side, as you can see here, okay, that would be to donate H plus and make the solution more acidic. If it goes to the right side, right, which is a response to a rise in pH. Okay, rise in pH meaning we're making the solution more basic. Okay, what's happening is there's a release of a hydrogen ion. Okay, making the solution more basic. Okay. All right. So if it goes to the left side, it's responding to a drop in pH to allow the solution to be more acidic. If it goes to the right side, then basically as a response to a rise in pH, and that will allow us to make the solution more basic. I hope this is like clear and understandable. So acidification in the seas. That's a current thing that's been happening and the environment due to basically human activities such as burning fossil fuels that's basically threatening water quality. Okay, what's happening is that the CO2 is the main product of fossil fuel combustion, and CO2 basically is what's making things more acidic. So CO2 dissolved in seawater forms carbonic acid. This is what's being explained here. Okay, so this is the carbonic acid that's being formed. Okay, um, and this is what we call ocean acidification. Okay, so what's happening here is the fact that as seawater acidifies, right, H plus ions combine with carbonate ions to produce bicarbonate ions. Carbonate is required for calcification, and this is what you're seeing here. Okay, this is carbonate, and it combines with calcium to produce calcium carbonate by many marine organisms, okay, including reef-building corals. So if this is affected, then a whole bunch of different organisms that live on corals, on reef corals, will be affected as well. Okay, so researchers believe that ocean acidification is likely to cause a profound ecosystem-wide changes in coral reefs. So it's very critical to what's going on. And this is, of course, part of climate change that's been happening and all the effect of, burning fossil fuels by humans and so on, and other environmental things that's been going on. Okay, and yeah, so this should complete our lesson for today. We talked about water and its importance, and basically we talked about basically the pH and how we can measure acids and bases and things like that. And that should be it. So I hope you guys have a great day and happy studying. See you next time.